I think we have a bigger market. And the flip side, so it's a very enticing place to begin a business. We also have a lot of social problems as a result of having so many people. On the flip side as well, I think compared to a lot of the other Southeast Asian countries, comparatively speaking, let's say Malaysia and Singapore, we have a smaller percentage of people in our country who are problem solvers, who are not only educated, but also they have the ability to think critically about issues and then create solutions. So the entrepreneur class is a smaller percentage. I think there was a study done 5-6 years ago by McKinsey that looked at Southeast Asian nations. So a country like Malaysia, 10%, maybe up to 10% of their population are people who have this ability to become entrepreneurs, to think critically and solve problems. In Indonesia, it's closer to 1%. If you look at the volume, there's a lot more Indonesians who can do it, but as a percentage of the population, that's a lot less. And what that tells you is that in the future, we're going to still need help from people overseas to help us solve our problems. So a lot of the situation right now is you have a lot of really good founders, right, creating new businesses or applying kind of solutions from abroad into the local ecosystem. But there's a huge gap between these founders and the teams in helping that founder to execute some of his vision. So what you're having is a talent crunch where everyone's competing, which is good for a lot of professionals because their salaries are increasing tremendously, but at the same time it makes it really hard for us to execute our vision.
The startup ecosystem in Indonesia, to me, is going to be very, very large. There are some large players already here. And one of the key things is the population size, the number of individuals that are currently living in Indonesia, and also the percent of individuals that are connected to their mobile device. So a lot of investors are super interested in the Indonesian market based on the 300 million people population, based on the 90% of population here that's connected to a mobile device and to mobile internet. So if you take a look at the market in general, it's the largest population-wise of Southeast Asian countries, and it has the highest percentage of mobile inclusion. So you've got companies that are already big, Tokopedia, Blibli.
Well, I think if you look at Southeast Asia in general, the market is very fragmented. So it's kind of hard to generalize across markets. What I can say about Indonesia is that I arrived here in 2008. Not much was happening then, but when I came back in 2012, things really got started. And I think if you look at the market right now, Indonesia is really getting hot. A lot of investors coming in, a lot of investments being done, and also if you look at the deal size of investments, it's definitely going up. So that's all a good sign.
Jakarta is definitely a massive city, let alone in population, but you see a lot of individuals that may have been born here or grew up here, went to university or college in the States or Europe or Australia, that's taking their talents and coming back here and deciding to start their own startup. So the startup scene here is very robust in the sense that you've got locals here that are very talented, that are starting their own startups. You've got foreigners that are coming back home or that are just coming back to Indonesia to see the opportunity that they have in front of them. So the startup scene here is very different than other Indonesian cities because alone Jakarta is the capital. Jakarta has the high-rises, it has the dollars, and it has that sense of you're in the middle of it all. It's really the New York City of Indonesia. However, there are other cities where you can find a lot of tech talent, such as Yogyakarta and Surabaya.
Well, to be very honest, if you look at Indonesia, I think Jakarta is the place to be if you're running a startup. I know there's some initiatives in Medan and in Surabaya. I know some people are trying to build their company from Bali, but I think if you're looking for investments, if you're looking for co-founders, etc., Jakarta is the place to be.
They have better access to the internet, so a lot of the online startups have a leg up, have a bigger market in Jakarta than they do regionally. I think what you're seeing a lot in the regional areas are more niche services, but you have other cities like Bandung, like Jogja and Surabaya. They have really good tech talent there, because of the universities that produce them, especially Jogja. So you see a lot of tech companies, even game companies from overseas, setting up shop in a small city like Yogyakarta because of the university, because they produce a lot of IT students, IT graduates. But what you're having is that in Jakarta, there's a higher percentage of people solving problems and building startups that could be scaled globally, whereas a lot of in the regional areas, they're creating something specific either for their region or for Indonesia.
There are some other cities in Indonesia where a lot of tech talent do live. You have Yogyakarta, you have Surabaya, as well as Bali. Bali is a very large, growing startup ecosystem. There's a big co-working space in Ubud called Hubud, as well as in Bali. You've got a lot of individuals moving there, wanting to enjoy the beach lifestyle, the Bali lifestyle, and seeking the opportunity to continue their business streams in Bali.
Well, if you look at Indonesia, like most of the successful startups that are currently here are solving local problems rather than having a global focus. So if you look at startups like Tokopedia, you know, any other startups like Traveloka, they're all serving the local market. So I think great startups, you know, that you will see coming from Indonesia are having a very local focus.
It's always tough to estimate the global reach of any startups coming out of Southeast Asia. However, with the sheer population size in Indonesia, I really do believe that Indonesia is an up-and-coming ecosystem for startups, as well as an up-and-coming economy. So moving forward, I do see some big Indonesian startups being able to move globally. But first, I really do believe that they're going to take over Southeast Asia in general, and then further move west.
I think it's easy for people in Indonesia to get into a meeting with a potential investor, simply because if they're serving the Indonesian market, it's huge. So there's an interest by investors to invest in startups here in Indonesia solving an Indonesian problem because the potential is huge, similar to China and India. But what you're having is the difficulty to close. And I think it comes back to whether or not they can execute and whether or not the founders have enough experience. So what you're having is, again, coming back to the point, a lot of really good founders, but the amount of talent that can help them execute is still quite lacking. So a lot of the top startups, they're recruiting from overseas. They're going to Silicon Valley trying to find a CTO. You know, they're looking for people from India to help them with tech. So that's the current situation. So it's easy to get into a meeting with an investor and to pitch, but I think closing it is another matter. You're going to see in the next 5 years a lot of overseas companies buying, you know, a lot of startups overseas buying Indonesian startups to access the market. And then they would add value through technology, through their experience and resources in tech, in product design, and also in marketing. Optimistically speaking, maybe we're looking at the next coming of India and China. That's very optimistic. So because we have the same kind of ecosystem where we have a large market, and again, optimistically speaking, if we get a huge influx of entrepreneurs here locally, or you know, either they come here or locally sourced entrepreneurs where they create new businesses and are able to execute, then what we can see is a growth spurt similar to what we're seeing to a lesser extent in India and in China.